Hi, welcome to our Friday lunchtime learning session in the ABU Facebook group. And I'm really thrilled today to have Mary McGUIRE with us. Now, Mary is a fantastic author and coach and works with women, so she's the perfect person to have on. She's recently published her second book called The Female Edge. Accelerate your leadership ambition and craft a career in your own terms, which really is a fabulous book. Mary had a very interesting start in life. Mary, I'm going to ask you to fill us in on where things started for you and how you got to your incredible international successful business that you're in and running today.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. It's a real pleasure to be here and be part of this amazing group. I always find it very inspirational. So I mean, now I focus on helping women to be more successful in business, and whether that's corporate business or through their own path, it doesn't matter, but very much helping women to be successful. But my own beginnings and where I came from and how I got to the journey of realizing not only was my story valid for other women, but I could help other women, was quite a long, rocky one. So I was brought up in Birmingham, England, to Irish immigrant parents. So they came over in the 50s. I was the youngest of 4 surviving children. And my father was an alcoholic. My mother was a highly anxious, usually bordering on neurotic person. One of my sisters had autism. And we just had a very, very chaotic upbringing. And when it came to me joining the world of work, there wasn't very many expectations on me. Both my parents had left school at 14 and went into manual labour of some sort straight away, unskilled work, and stayed in that all of their adult life. They'd come from farming and rural communities. So the expectations were that you got out and you just worked at whatever was in front of you as soon as you could. So that idea of having expectations of yourself in terms of education, going on to higher education or further education, going on and actually thinking of the world of work as somewhere where you'd have a career, just wasn't part of our background. And so they just wanted me to go and get a job, and they would have been happy with any job as long as I was earning money. So that sense of starting from low expectations means that I think that you can have a number of choices about how you go that way. But I think you can either accept this is me, this is my life, this is the parameters that I'm going to live within, and possibly be happy with that, possibly not. Or you can say, actually, this isn't my life, and I'm actually going to find a way to break out of, this set of expectations or this ancestral path that I'm on that actually limits me. And I did that by moving out of Birmingham completely. I took a living job in a hotel, lived in catering roles in different parts of the country for a few years. And that helped me to just get into environments where I was interacting with people from completely different backgrounds, from completely different class groups to mine. I was obviously working class, and I was meeting people much more middle class and upper class, and just understanding the wider set of expectations that there were in the world around me. And then once I settled, I then fell in love very young, and that person became the love of my life and continues to be my love of my life. And that was a chef in the hotel I was working with, and her name is Joy. And at the time, this is 33 years ago, at the time that we started our relationship, there was very much anti-gay sentiment, was very active. The press were very anti-gay. It was a time when AIDS was very high. You couldn't have a job if you were in the same, you couldn't have a job in the public sector or in the military or anything like that if you were in an openly same-sex relationship. Wow, and obviously my parents weren't welcoming us with open arms as well. So there were lots of tensions there around, would I even continue a relationship with my parents if I continued the relationship with my partner? Anyway, that all sorted itself out, and I did manage to keep a relationship going.
But it's brilliant, and it's really lovely to hear that you are still together and very happy. I mean, that's brilliant. And Debbie, who's watching, says, I come from a very similar background. First job at 15, straight out of school.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think if we come from like many generations of families that actually that was their way, they're not going to really have anything extra for us, any extra expectations for us. So I don't look at my parents and think, that they were, bad people or they should have done more for me. They did what they could with the
Absolutely.
best resources they had at the time. They probably weren't
Yeah.
enough, but they were what they had at the time. So, I'm very accepting of that. And yeah, I was very lucky because, when you live in a world, and there was lots of people in the world who still live in a very strong anti-gay sentiment, you're constantly told you're ruining life, you shouldn't do that, nobody will want to take you seriously, you certainly can't be out at work. Took me a while to be out at work, but you can be out at work, because I lost my job when I came out with Joy. So we were both working in the same
Really? Oh
hotel,
God, that's
and
dreadful.
I was fired, and I happened to have a living job, so I was fired and homeless all in one
Oh
go.
God.
So that was just what happened. But there's always been a strength in me, a strength of character, and I think the benefit of hindsight helps me now because I can see it clearer. But what I realized was whenever somebody was telling me you can't do this or you can't do that, there was always something in me saying I can do that. So it's a phrase I use in the book, which is don't let anyone else's can't get in the way of your can. And I think that was really strong in me. As soon as somebody put down something that says you can't do this, that became like a red rag or a line to jump over. It's like, oh, good, there's a boundary there. Let me see how I can get across that.
That's
So
wonderful.
I think that strength of character in me really helped in that resilience. And again, something I talk about in the book is to be successful in anything in life, you do need that resilience. You do need that acceptance that failure will happen, pushbacks will happen, challenges will happen, not everyone will like you, and some people will be out and out betrayals, and actually go out of their way to actually make you fail in some way. That's all par of the course, I should say, par of the course. That's all things that are going to happen along the way, and it's like, let's just accept they're all going to happen. I can cope with them. I can cope with whatever comes, but my path is my path and I'm going to carry on going. That's what we mean by resilience. It's just accepting these things happen and keep going.
I'm really interested to know, Mary, given your background, whether you think your resilience, which is quite extraordinary in a way, given your background, is something that you're born with and just happens to be in you, but wasn't in either of your parents, for instance. And I don't know about, your siblings, or whether, I don't know, there was something that happened when you were young that did encourage you, the sort of, was it one of the kind of typical things like a teacher took an interest in you, or was there anything that you can
I think that is,
or was it just you?
I don't know. It's a fabulous question, Lucy. Is resilience something that we're born with, or can it be nurtured? And I would say it's a bit like leadership. It's a bit of both. But certainly for me, if I think about my siblings, and indeed my parents, is I definitely had a stronger resilience. I have to say my brother's pretty resilient, but it's in a different way, and he interacts with the world in a very different way to me. But I can see that I was stronger and I didn't implode when pressures came on me in the way that I've seen sometimes my siblings did. So I don't know, but certainly for me, I was always, I'd call springy. So when I look back at my childhood, I don't see it as littered with traumas and littered with difficulties and littered with abuse. Even though them things happened, I actually was mostly a happy child. I just had some bad stuff happen to me along the way, but I had this bounce back. Now, clearly there were some of them wounds that came into my adulthood and I've had to work through them. But generally I had this bounce back ability, so I would still be happy and let's go and play and let's find things to do. So yeah, I think it was strong in me, whereas some people that's probably not as strong, and that's where you need to nurture it with them.
Yeah.
And I think that can come from different places. It can definitely come from your peer group, if you have strong peers. I've had childhood friends of mine who I lost contact with for many years and then got back, who've said, you helped me so much because I was the brave one, I was the fearless one, I was the cheeky one.
Wow.
And I would go and do things that were considered naughty and you shouldn't do them. And they would come along with me because they went on the coattails of my confidence, and they felt they became more confident and became more resilient as a result of that. So your peer group, your parents can help if they're able to. Sometimes school can, school has a very mixed bag in terms of what it can be.
Yeah.
And then we can build it as we get older. So if we haven't been resilient as children, we can definitely learn the skills of resilience as we get older.
That's fantastic to know. And is that, I mean, I don't want to sort of skip over the next stages too much, but is that what you have, is that what you work on now with women, the women that you support and coach?
Yeah, resilience is a big one. And there's lots of reasons for that. And I know we titled this Bleeding Edge to Leading Edge, because I'll talk a bit about why it took me a while to focus on just women. And I was really resistant to that because I just thought, well, I don't want to be seen as a feminist in a radical way, because I've worked a lot with radical feminists, and certainly I don't feel any more feminine when I'm with them, that's for sure. So I had this sort of resistance to it. But when I finally let the penny drop and say, but you're really, really, really good at helping women find their own brilliance and building their confidence, why wouldn't you do that? It took me a long time, and we'll talk about why that took a long time and why I was resistant. What I realized was there's a few things that women need to get help with. So there's 3 premises in the book. The first one is women do not need to learn how to be good leaders. They've got that. They've got how to manage staff, how to do the strategy, how to manage the budget, how to balance all of the different competing things when they're running projects. It's not about the nuts and bolts of leadership. They need to learn how to be a woman in a leadership field which is ever so slightly tilted against them. It's an uneven playing field. There's all sorts of things that get in the way. There's all sorts of things that mean there's unconscious bias, which means somehow you as a female showing up in a leadership framework is not going to be seen as seriously or as capable as a man, even if that man hasn't got anywhere near as much experience as you. That's the reality of the world we live in.
Yeah.
So that's the first premise. The second one, which is a really important one, which is part of the coaching programs, is success is an inside job. So we can't be successful in our life, in our environment, in our outer world, unless we've worked out the success on the inside. And an awful lot of that success is knowing who we are, loving who we are, accepting who we are, and knowing from that place of loving acceptance of that is, what are the things that I want to do? What are my intentions? What are my goals? What are the things, my big dreams? What are the things I want to bring into the world? But it starts from really getting connected from who I am as an individual and feeling really, really good about that. So that's really, really
that's
important.
so important.
Yeah. And then the third premise is that it's really about a journey. So we're not one and done as people. We get to a milestone, we've sorted out a goal, we can tick that box, we never have to deal with that again. That's just not the way we are. We're constantly in a state of emergence, of change, of evolution. That's all the time. It's every minute of every day. But also, if we think of our career like that, it's the same thing. So I use the metaphor of a journey, of a path, and some of the tools I use are about, and they're all in the book, I just share them, and a career map, looking at what have been the drivers around our career, a compass, which is about our values, so that we know how to navigate a journey because we've got a compass that actually guides us. So thinking of things in terms of that constant flow of movement really helps us with things. And then going back to the resilience point, is resilience is key to that, because if we see things as a journey and constantly changing, and we've got a compass, we can use a bigger analogy of if we're on a sea journey and we're sailing. While we might know the journey from Liverpool to New York, for example, we know, if we did a straight path, that's exactly where we go. But when we're on the sea, we're going to be buffeted by it. We're going to have to deal with storms. We're going to have to deal with our navigation going in the wrong direction because the wind has taken us in the wrong. So we know it's not going to be a straight line, that journey. We're going to have to deal with all these other things along the way, and then find our way still to New York. And life's a bit like that. So resilience is about understanding it like that, is setbacks things that don't go the way that we expect them to, results that are less than we hoped for, failures that happen to us. They're all things that we have as points of reflection to then make a decision that helps us to move forward.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy, the journey across the sea like that, which is sort of almost in a straight line, but actually it's never straight. And it's not even about arriving, is it? It's about the continuous journey. And real. And do you think it just occurred to me, do you think that women are brought up more on a kind of happy ever after? You get to a certain stage, you do certain things and everything will be fine, more than men? Do you think that we look at life as a sort of looking to kind of get to an end point and then sit there, more than men?
Without a doubt. And I talk about this in the Female Edge in terms of what causes things like that uneven playing field, and that ever so slightly more geared towards men as leaders, and why that happens. And some of it is in our socialization process. So our gender roles are heavily anchored towards expectations. So the messages we give boys growing up are very different to the messages we give girls. And this, has been, I don't know how many years, but we can't go back to the prehistoric times and know for then. But certainly, since the Roman times onwards, this gender separation of roles. And generally we say men are there to be strong, to be the providers, to go out, to be competitive, to be part of team sport, to be loud, to be assertive, to be aggressive at times, because that's part of the competitive nature. And that's all seen as things that not only are acceptable, but we hone in male behavior. And women, it's about being supportive, it's about being gentle, it's about being kind, it's about being demure, as in what we see as ladylike. It's about being there to support others. So we sort of like put them into this very different role. And if women behave in a way that goes across that male role, we often actually knock them back and give them very negative messages about that type of woman. That type of woman is not a nice woman. We don't like to see women who are assertive. We don't like to see women who are loud at meetings. We don't like to see women who are pushy about getting their point across, because that's not the way that women behave. And that's all part of that. And that socialization process is not just our parents, although our parents are part of it because they've had it from their parents and their parents, but we have it at school. We have that in our literature, we have that in our fairy tales. I mean, we are still, our young children now, I think places like Disney and that are getting better, but it did tend to be a thing of, most of the dialogue around fairy tales was, it was the princess who was waiting for something good to happen. Prince Charming or some, male archetype was going to come. They were going to save you. You were going to be dependent and ever grateful on them, and you're going to live ever after with them. I think we're seeing stronger female role models coming through in fairy tales now, but that's really strong. And then fairy tales come from that socialization. So yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, Debbie, going back to the sea journey, says the image of the sea in perpetual motion is perfect. Crikey, patriarchy is as rife as ever and has certainly been reinforced via my parents, women at home, men at work. And Michaela says, happy ever after. Fairy stories are definitely more geared to girls. And Debbie says again, women are made to feel other if they don't toe the line. Very, very true, Debbie. Still going on. By verbalizing our non-acceptance, we will get there. So Mary, tell us where, it's obviously a long journey, but from where you got to, from that homeless state, you were outed or you came out and lost your job, lost your home. What happened and how have you got to where you are now?
Well, certainly what helped me was going into a stable, loving relationship, because I'd not had that. Now, just to put that into perspective, I had parents who loved me, but were not loving parents and were not nurturing parents. So I never doubted that they loved me, in terms of I was part of their kin and their blood, and, you know, they would make sure nothing bad happened to me, but there wasn't that sense. So going into a relationship that was loving, that was nurturing, that was supportive, was without a doubt a game changer for me. So from that base, it was obvious to me I needed to go back into education, because I'd left with nothing, no qualifications, no plan, no idea. Hence I just went into living jobs to just find a way through.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize I had quite a strong intellect, because that had never been either seen or reinforced or encouraged. But that was very strong. So going back into education, I became a social worker. That was my first degree, and went into that role, and enjoyed that. But after becoming a chief exec of a not-for-profit charity for autism specific services, I realised that actually I like the organisational piece. I like the bit which is building an organisation. It's helping teams, it's defining roles, it's creating development opportunities. So it was, although I really enjoyed the social work aspects, it was the organisational aspects I thrived on. So after doing a master's in business, I then flipped into organisational consulting. So that's what I've been doing in the main for the last 22 years.
That's fantastic. And you've obviously built up an incredibly successful business doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And traveled the world, and worked with amazing companies, and worked with amazing people, and had a blast, really.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's so and that was when I started to realize it's very hard to own your own intellect if you've always been told you're not very clever, you'll never amount to much, and you leave school with no qualification. So and some of that was my own self-sabotage, because I used to truant a lot from school because I wasn't very engaged. Is like I had this view that I just didn't have much about me. But after my second degree, and I've got a third degree since, I realised actually I have got a strong intellect, and even more so than that, for the consulting side. So it's slightly different for when I'm a coach. From the consulting side, I've got a very analytical mind. So I think in terms of systems and systems theory. I'm constantly looking at moving parts and looking at how they link together. So going into global companies where it's 100,000 plus employees, and looking at a change issue, and looking at how they're trying to move a way of working from one way to another, and how do you put together a map for that, and then what do you actually do to change the behaviours of people, I was really good at, because I came from social work, so it's all about behaviour. I came from a place where you had to be very practical, because I didn't have much about me when I was growing up, so I had to learn myself. And I then also had this analytical mind. So for me, it ended up being the best thing that I could have done going into consulting. It was really enjoyable.
That's so interesting. But you said in the that this talk would have three sort of bullet points that you'd cover, and the first one is how helping everyone, and obviously your work from social work to coaching and consulting has been about helping is the main issue, but how helping everyone equals helping no one. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I'd like to share with you, because I think the majority of your members in this group are obviously either writers or aspiring writers, or in the very early stages of thinking maybe I've got a book in me. And this is my second book, so I'll mention the first book first, Coming Home to You. That was a book I wrote from the heart, and it was very much about how can you live your happiest, most fulfilled life, find a way to your path to success. And it's a good book, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have any ideal client in mind. I was thinking, I don't want to have one particular person that I could help. I want to help everyone. This book could be for anyone could get value from it. And it's true, any man or woman, regardless of their age, would find something in it of value. But the trouble with the all sorts approach to going out there is that it gets diluted in a very, very noisy stage. And what I didn't have in mind is what happens after the book. What is it do I do after this book is published, and what do I provide for people? I was still am a very successful consultant. I was doing my corporate world. work. And then every now and again I say, oh, I've got this little book, would you be interested? Because it didn't work with what I was doing. So I realized I had to be more focused on what I seen as my core offering, and then think of the book in the context of that. So you talk about it as the 3 Ps, which is a really, really, really simple model to get the message across. You've got loads of great models, but this is one of them I love. And the 3 Ps is your person, their pain, and what the promise is. Really, really simple. But I didn't understand that that was really important. And part of that is understanding who your ideal client is, what people often call the avatar. So who's the person?
Yeah.
So who's the person that I will be sitting across, and I know that my skills, my experience, my tools, my models will be ideal to get them from where they are now to where they want to be, to the point of transformation for them, and that adds value to them and their life. So once I started to think in them terms, I then created my coaching programs around that. So as I said,
who
I
is
was
your
more
ideal client, Mary? Who is your avatar?
So what I started to realize is, when I started to focus, is instead of it being more general to people who might be interested in any sort of change, I realized my area of skill is the corporate world. I've worked with many, many global organizations now. And in that corporate world, what I have done is influenced and coached hundreds of people, male and female leaders, but an awful lot of them female leaders, where they have really struggled to find success. And what I realized was, actually, instead of seeing that as something that's almost on the side, I'm doing a big project, and we're doing a bit of coaching on the side, which is how I used to see it. It's like, well, maybe pivot this, because I can actually help many, many women in the way that they navigate a big corporate world. So my ideal clients tend to be women who are working in a corporate world. They're in a senior role, so they've already got into a leadership role, but they're seeing their frustrations, either that they're not having the influence they want based on the role that they have, or that opportunities are passing them by that they were perfectly capable of doing, but for some reason people didn't see them as perfectly capable, or they're ambitious to get to the next level, but for some reason it's not happening, they're not getting there. So then women who are in that environment, there's various things that they can do, and I actually have a number of coaching programs that help them with that. It was understanding that helping women to be more successful at what they do was my sweet spot, that then led me to actually all of these tools, all of these ideas make a really, really good book to get out to even more women across the world. And that's where the Female Edge came from. And just in terms of your PPP, in terms of that, that's all in the title. So that's what particularly Rethink helped me with. So the Female Edge shows it's for women. Accelerate your leadership ambitions and craft your career on your own terms. So the pain is, I'm not accelerating my career, and the promise is, but you will craft your career on your own terms. So that simple PPP can be done very, very succinctly once you've got it really clear in your head. What is it that is my brilliance, and how can I bring that to other people? So I talk about owning your brilliance in your book. I have to say I was a bit slow to that party myself, but once I'm there, I'm okay.
Sounds like you've certainly owned your brilliance. Debbie is asking, does it matter what industry your clients are from? Do you have a specialist industries, or just corporate generally?
No, I've been, it's a great question actually, Debbie, thank you. But I've been really, really lucky, because in my consulting career, I've gone across, I wouldn't say every industry, there's probably industries I haven't touched, but many, many industries. And so that has helped me to see, given me a unique observer perspective of the issues and the dynamics that are at play in the business world, regardless of sector. So I've worked across the energy sector, mainly oil and gas, but also the nuclear industry. I've worked across the finance industry. I've worked across manufacturing, food groups. I've worked across the fintech sector, financial technology. I've worked across the new technology and the web-based businesses. Mobility, car industry. I mean, I could go on and on. It's been so broad. And as a result of that, what I realise is the things that we're often dealing with are agnostic of sector. now and again, the sector is important. And certainly the sector has, like what we see in the finance sector is a very different type of behavior than I see in the new technology space, like your LinkedIn's and your Airbnbs and people like that I've worked for. Very different culture and very different vibe. But one thing's for sure, we still have an uneven playing field. We still have women who are showing up in a way that actually doesn't always serve their ambitions because they've got socialization and knockbacks and things that they're holding on to. And we've got cultures that don't always actually help women to succeed.
That's yeah. So well, just, you know, so insightful. Do you are there some industries that are worse for women than others? I mean, I'm sure there are. I mean, I'm wondering at this point whether with the oil and gas industry, we would be in a better position now if more women were in leadership positions there, and with all the energy problems we're having at the moment.
Yeah, very likely. Very likely. I say that a gender equal world equals a better world, and that's across everything, because I just think we get a balance of decisions, we get a balance of considerations beyond that which is purely driven by profit and growth. Profit and growth are important to all economies, so I'm not anti them. I think I'm anti them at the expense of the wider environmental and ecological considerations, which is what we haven't been good at. But yeah, I think that there are some industries. What we see is engineering industries struggle with it. Certain finance industries, depends where they are, but certainly I think still traditional banks, when you get into the investment side, like your hedge funds and things like that, still very male dominated. You see that a lot in utilities, where it's more the engineering side of things, because what we're seeing is, even though there's been a big push to get more women into engineering, into mathematics, into more of the science-based disciplines, there's still much less of them, and that's across the world. Actually, I was just going to see if there's any no, but certainly OECD have just done a report about it, and they're saying that's still an issue. And so, you know, if you think of it as a pipeline of talent that would go up a leadership, if you've already got a smaller proportion at the very start of the pipeline of women, then as you get further up, you're going to get less of them into the leadership positions.
Yeah, absolutely. Michaela says, slightly changing the subject, just listening to Mary, I realized that I would absolutely be more attracted to working with a coach who came from a similar socioeconomic background to me. Do you find that you attract women to work with you as their coach who have had similar backgrounds to you, or is it completely kind of across the board?
I think it's completely across the board, but it's a very good point that I think there's always some unconscious code that we're always running all the time, all of us.
Yeah.
And that's our what we call our point of attraction. So the things we think and feel and do in our world is giving out messages generally, even to people we don't see, about how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves in the world. And there may be ones I'm giving out which say that people who come from similar socioeconomic group to me may be well suited to work with me, but generally it is a mix, and because I work internationally, it's a mix in terms of their different cultural backgrounds as well. So, you know, not only in terms of geographically, but also in terms of their racial profile or their religious or ethnic background also might be different as well.
Of course, no, absolutely. And you were saying earlier, Mary, you were talking about the importance of focusing. I mean, writing the book is important, publishing the book is important, but you were saying it's really important to have a vision for you and for the book beyond those, you know, those two stages. So what are you looking at? How are you looking at using your book now and getting your message further afield?
Thank you. And again, I learned that because of it being my second book. So my first book, it felt like a bit of a cliff edge. I got it out there, got it on Amazon, got it into lots of bookshops, was selling quite well. And it's like, oh, what do I do now? And it's like this big cliff. I felt like I was falling off. And I didn't quite have a plan of what do I do now, especially since I seen it, that was very much, you know, still in my corporate consulting, and this was something almost on the side. So some of it was my head wasn't in the right place. Whereas the female edge, it was very much, this is what I do. I still do work with corporate clients, so I'm still doing some of that, but it's much less than what I used to do. And I'm mainly doing coaching, and I have a range of coaching programs. So what do I want the book to do for me? And that was a question I had before I started writing the book. What would this book be about? What would it do for me that my current way of working isn't doing for me? And there was a number of goals that I had. One of them was I want to reach more women than I actually can do through them having to come and coach and be coached by me. For lots of reasons, women aren't always up for that, or they can't afford that, or it's not the right time for that. And I think, but learning all of the tools and the ideas could be something I give to them for a very, very reasonable price, because it's a very good price on Amazon. So I thought that's the first thing, is reach more women. The second thing is to use it as almost a business card to all of the clients I've worked for over the last 22 years, to say, because I'm very good at keeping relationships. So even my very first client, 20 odd years ago, we still keep in touch. So to say to them, I know you know me as Mary, the corporate consultant who does this work, but hey, I've got this book about female leadership. I'd really like to know me as this Mary as well, the Mary who not only knows a lot about female leadership, but actually can help female leaders to be more successful. Because I think that's an issue that you have in your organisation, and I think we ought to talk about it. So I could have done that as a single email without going through all of the time, energy and expense of a book. But a book gives it a whole set of depth that would never come from an email. So it's an expensive calling card, but I physically sent this to 120 clients in 12 countries, because I want them to see it. So it's a way of realigning and then repositioning in their head, oh, Mary is about female leadership now. Well, that's great. We've got an issue with that, and we can do that. And then the third one is to help me to grow my social media platform. So whether we love or hate social media is the place we need to be to actually get our voice heard. My mission is to reach as many women as possible, to empower them to their career success. That's my goal. And to do that, I need to get my voice out there, and I need to consistently tell people about that. The great thing about a book is it's a point of focus to help you to do that. It's a point of focus as you go up to the launch of the book. Look at me, I've got this book. This book's going to tell you about this. This is why it's going to be interesting. This is all the value you're going to get from it. These are all the ways that you can do that. And then from launch, it's all about, and there's still this you could think about, and there's still these tools, and there's still this you could do. And even if them women never actually come to me and buy my coaching services, what I hope is that there will be tools in there that help them in some way do something different in the way that they see the world. So even if they only take the free tools, but it helps them in some way, I've still helped.
That's fantastic, Mary. And I think those three things that you said are so true. And I think what also it's interesting that you talked about growing your social media presence. And I think that a lot of women fear that, you used the phrase, look at me. A lot of women fear going out there and saying, look at me, for all sorts of very good reasons, like, fear of criticism, lack of confidence, not in what they do, but in just, saying how good they are. But a book is great because you can actually say, don't look at me, look at my book. My book kind of stands in front of me. It's not, you're not boasting about yourself. It's about saying, this book is interesting, and you may, you'll find interesting things about it, and repurposing the content as social media quotes and blogs and articles and videos. It's all, the material's all there, and it sort of stands for you and stops you having to go out there and, put yourself on the line in some ways.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what I found, I got help from one of your trusted partners, Sophie Juries. When I put it into a structure, it actually feels quite daunting, social media, in terms of what do I do and what do I write about now. But when you've done a book, you've got at least a year's worth of stuff in there.
Absolutely.
If you think about it, because you could pull out different things, you could pull out parts of chapters, you can pull out quotes, you can pull out ideas. There's loads of things. So it also allows you to get content out there regularly in bite-sized pieces, which is low-level effort, because the other thing great about having it in a book is, you know, the editors in Rethink Press, which is a fabulous organisation, I loved working with Rethink, and the editors have already done the work on that. So whenever I scrape something out of my manuscript and put it in, there's very little I need to do to make sure it's a tidy piece of work, because I know it's been professionally edited. Even better.
That's great. So Mary, that's brilliant. Oh yes, Michaela's just put your LinkedIn contacts there. So but also, you, if anybody does want to talk about working with you, you run something called, you have something called the Professional Women's Playbook. And what is that, and where can we find that?
So that's a program I've designed for women who are looking for private coaching sessions, and with that one we're using many of the tools in the book. It's slightly different. We have a slightly different approach to it, and it includes individual coaching programs. It's a 3-month program, and I have that on my main coaching website, which is findyourjoyfullife.com. It's all one word, which looks very long, but if you break it up, it's not so bad. Findyourjoyfullife.com. That may be in one of the links that we can put in the chat.
Definitely.
And that one's a 3-month program, and that brings women through a development journey to actually help them to go deeper for the success, clarity of their goals, and then start taking some actionable steps to move forward.
That's absolutely fantastic. Well, Mary, thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, your story is inspirational. I mean, for anybody who lacks confidence in their own abilities, what you've been able to achieve, given a really not terribly promising start in life, is absolutely fantastic to hear. And also what you're doing for women in you know, the really quite difficult environment of the corporate sector and individually. And you know, your book is fantastic, and we'll certainly put the link to that in as well. So thank you very much for being here today and sharing all that with us.
Well, thank you, Lucy. And as I've said it many times, thank you very much, because the reason I'm here is because I went onto your webinar saying about writing a book, and then I joined your book builder program, which was fantastic, and then I worked with Rethink to get it done. So the whole thing was a real pleasure from beginning to end. So thank you very much, because you're an amazing advocate for women who want to write a book.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mary. And thanks everyone who is here. And I hope if you weren't here, that you're listening to this on catch up, and do put any comments in, you know, if you're watching on catch up later, and I'm sure Mary will come in and answer any questions. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you again. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.